Welcome to episode 8 of the Critical Coach podcast. If you want to support what I'm doing, head over to thecriticalcoach.com/shop and get yourself some gear. If you enjoy the podcast, follow it on Spotify, subscribe on YouTube, or give it 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. Now, over the past few weeks, I've been receiving feedback about the podcast, which I really appreciate. Something that's come up more than once is that it's difficult to engage with due to the length. I love long-form podcasts, but I realise that's not for everyone. So I want to try changing things up a bit. I'll continue to publish the long-form conversation, but I'll also release shorter clips that focus on specific parts of the full discussion. You'll be able to tell which is which from the title. Full episodes will continue to have the episode number followed by its title. Clips will have the episode number followed by the word clips. If this works for you, let me know. Lastly, sorry about the little bits of distortion in my audio. I've screwed something up in Zoom's recording settings that I'm going to have to figure out before the next conversation. This episode is my second conversation with Dan Minton, a veteran of 30 plus years in the Australian Army. He's served as a soldier and an officer, a member of Armoured Corps and Army Aviation. As a civilian, he's been involved in the analysis and development of vocational training and currently works as the project director for Simbotix Innovations. We do a talk-through of the 5 whys that Dan mentioned in our last conversation. We discuss being successful as a highly disagreeable person and wrap up with what excites Dan about education. Cheers. Some of the feedback that I've been getting about the podcast is to do with the length. People asking why it's so long. And if you're up for it, I thought it would be interesting to do a talk-through of something you mentioned in our last conversation, the idea of 5 whys. Ask why 5 times, and you'll generally be able to get to the bottom of a problem. So I figured we could, I haven't gone deeper into it than answering the first why, but if you're up for it, I think it'd be useful for me, and it might be useful for other people to get a sense of how it plays out.
Yeah, man. So the concept of 5 whys, and let's talk about 5 whys, why that is a thing. So 5 whys is a decision algorithm. Okay, and I know your listeners can't see me and they'll probably hear me, but 5 whys is simply a process to get to a core of a problem. So in safety terms, they use taproot. In military sense, they use the military appreciation process. In many other instances, they might use fishbone. But in essence, it allows you to drill into a process, a problem, a technique or an issue to find out what's going on, as far as you know. Okay, so remember, the 5 whys approach is a questioning technique, but it is simply based on the information that you have at hand. Now, if you extrapolate the 5 whys, at each point you might need more information. So when you go, why did that happen? You might need to gather more information and go to the next layer. So let's work through an example, and I'm going to use your experience with the exercise hierarchy. So I know we've spoken about exercise hierarchies before and how illuminating it is from a physical movement perspective. You know, physical movements are broken down into chunks. Why did that happen? How did that happen, etc.
Correct.
So let's talk about a fairly basic mechanism that you and I can discuss and engage with. I will coach you through the 5 whys and you can answer the questions. And at some point, you and I are going to run out of either A, information, or B, questions. Okay? So that's what the process is designed to elucidate. It's designed to pull information until you get to the point where you go, have I made a decision? Or am I capable of making this decision with enough information for now?
Okay.
Remember, the decisions are a point in time thing. Crack on.
All right. So let's do the exercise hierarchies, and then we'll go back to the other one, which is why is the podcast long? Why is it not 20, 30 minutes?
Okay.
So have you got a question for the exercise hierarchies then?
I do. Let's pick the primary exercise that many people do. So the body is composed of, finite components. We can't exercise our head, certainly not easily. The neck is attached to the thorax. We have arms, legs, chest, core, etc. Now, you are well aware of this far more than I. So let's talk about one of the most basic exercises that many people do. Let's talk about the push-up.
Okay.
Right. So I'm going to ask you a question. Why should I do a push-up?
Because it serves a goal.
Why? All right. Stop there. Okay. So we say a goal. It serves a goal. So if we ask it from a 5 whys perspective, we go, you've said, why does it serve a goal? So my next question would need to be framed as, why is that goal related to pushing up? What do I need to push up? Why do I need to physically push myself away from the ground to achieve the goal? There you go. So that's question 2. I've said, why do I need to do a push-up to achieve a goal? Why do I need to push myself away from the ground to achieve the goal? That's question 2.
So you may not need to push away from the ground. It really depends on the goal. The exercise is simply a means to apply stress to the body in order to provoke physiological adaptation in service of a goal. So if if the push-up is the exercise you've chosen to apply stress to achieve adaptation in pursuit of a goal, there could be a whole bunch of reasons for it. One, the easiest one is probably that it requires absolutely no equipment whatsoever, and it's relatively easy to teach someone to do it. And the skills that they learn, assuming they learn how to perform it proficiently, have a high degree of transfer to common movement patterns present in other exercises.
Okay. So at question 2, why do I need to do a push-up to achieve a goal? Why do I need to push myself away from the ground? Because it has potentially skills transference to other exercises. Yeah?
Yeah, that's part of it. So, to a certain extent, I'm not sure if I accept the premise of the question. Maybe you don't need to push yourself off the ground specifically, but that motion creates stress, and my goal might be to get your body to adapt to stress. Pushing may be part of it. It may be trying to develop strength within the triceps, stability within the shoulder, the ability to maintain a neutral spine while working with the upper body, or it could be teaching you to do laboured breathing, which is, can you differentiate the muscles required to stabilise the torso from those necessary to conduct breathing so that you can be loaded and breathe and not have to compromise stability of the spine in the process. So it really depends on the goal. Pushing up off the ground may be incidental depending on the goal, or it might be, you play rugby or you do combat sports, and being able to push someone away from you or express that sort of upper body pushing strength is relevant to your sport. Again, it just comes back to the goal.
Okay. So we're 2 questions in, and at question 2, you've diverged from the original intent. Okay. So let's recap. Sam, why do I need to push myself away from the ground? Why do I need to do a push-up? Because I have a goal. Now, question 2 is, what's the point of the goal? So I know it's a what question, not a why. So we've said you're doing push-ups because you need a goal. The goal is, as you summarised, we're going to exercise depending on your next step, i.e., what are you trying to achieve? Rugby, whatever. So question 3 is, great, I want to develop strength. Why should I use the push-up?
Maybe you shouldn't. What sort of strength do you want to develop?
Okay, so that's question 3. And if I continue to drill into this, well, why is the push-up effective?
The push-up may be effective depending on the goal. So the question assumes that it is, but in order to be effective, in order to achieve its intent, we need to know what the intent is. So the intent determines whether the push-up is the correct exercise to employ. And without knowing the intent, you can't go. It's very difficult. You can talk about what the push-up is, and what happens in the sense of motions and the forces that are present within the body, but whether it's fit for purpose depends on the goal. And the goal is usually driven by the client or the athlete, not the coach. So the client or the athlete determines the goal, and from that, the coach infers decisions that serve that goal.
Okay, and the 5th question, and I know we sound a little bit jumbled or muddled through this, and I'm doing this deliberately, is why do you want me to do the push-up?
Because it serves a goal that you've decided is important to you.
Okay, so a bit of a circular reference, but that process that I've just described to you is not designed for you to be confused as the answer are. It's designed for you to critically examine what is he asking me and why do I do this. So the 5 whys drill into the point of a problem, to the point that, as you found, probably question 3 and question 4, you're starting to go, I don't know, do I need more information? And I agree with your response. It depends on the goal. Sure. So 5 whys without a clear goal is fucking pointless. So unless you know what you're trying to achieve, by about question 2 or question 3 about why something happens, you run out of answers. And that's kind of the point. The 5 whys is designed to elucidate at the point where you don't have answers. So if you gave me 2 or 3 very cogent responses to why should I do a push-up to do this, build muscular strength, control nervous systems, next layer, to achieve your goal, why is my goal important? Because, core stability. But at question 4, you go, I'm not really sure. That at some point you don't have to keep going, by the way, but you might have used 3 out of the 5 questions to go, I think I found the point.
Yeah, there was something in there that I wasn't expecting, which is that when I was thinking about it before, I was thinking of it from the perspective of I'm trying to get to the bottom of something someone else has said. But going through that process, you sort of realize the question that, that is the subject of the 5 whys is up for debate as well. Maybe you're asking the wrong question to begin with, or it's not framed correctly, or, that it doesn't just have to be going in one direction. You might go, no, we need to stop here. We need to reconsider the question and approach the problem again.
No, I completely agree. So between question 1 and 2, you start to frame the problem. Between question 2 and 3, you start to define the problem. And between 3 and 4, you get specifics. And at 5, if you don't know what the fuck you're talking about, probably shouldn't have asked the original question. But that's the sort of the point of it. It really is a decision algorithm. If, then, but what? If yes, then no. If I go 2 steps forward and 1 to the left under these conditions, and the conditions change, do I go right? So it's an exceptionally good way to rapidly, and how fast have we got to the point where you've
We're 12 minutes in.
Right. So in 12 minutes, I've confused you about the point of a push-up. So in real terms, if I'm a client asking a trainer, why should I do a push-up? Because. Why? Because at about the 6-minute mark, if you're a trainer and don't know why you want your client to do the push-up, maybe don't do push-ups. or exactly what are you, and your response should be, what are you trying to achieve? I need this and this. Okay, the push-up is not for you. And that's why I'm suggesting that your exercise hierarchy is a perfect candidate for 5 whys. To go, why do I pursue that path? So the reason I want you to understand the strength of the 5 whys, it's okay to run out of answers.
Yeah.
It's okay to get to the point where you go, yeah, dude, I'm not sure. At question 2 or question 3, you might wish to explore the problem, define the problem, and get the solutions to go, stop, I need more information. I need more whatever, and then progress to the next why. Or stop. You might have got to that point.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess if you've got, if the point of going through the process is to find out what's true, then, failing partway through the process is fine. That's the whole point. You want to fail now while you're figuring it out so that you don't fail during implementation of, whatever it is that's important to you about the process.
Completely. And so it's always around what they call considerations and factors. What do you think is important? What is an influence into your decision cycle? But 5 whys, and 5 whys, for example, is used by the Brits as part of their CMAP.
All right.
So their combat mission appreciation process, the the basically SMAC. So if you go 5 whys on enemy or a threat, very quickly you can determine, situation, mission, execution, administration, command and SIG based on 5 whys. Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? Between 3 and 4, I'm pretty sure you're going to get to the point where you're going, well, this is why we're doing it, and then you can fill in the gaps. So situation, mission, execution, administration, command and SIG, execute, move on, can be extrapolated very, very quickly by a series of why we're doing this, why are you doing that, why are you doing that. So you really, really get some focus in your decision-making cycle about 5 whys.
All right. That's great. Now, can we do it again, but with a different question? So the question I got asked by a couple of people was, why is the podcast so long? Wouldn't it be better if it was, wouldn't it be more engaging if it was 20 or 30 minutes long? Now, I've thought about the question, and one of the people that mentioned it to me said, you should do the 5 whys, which, why I'm bringing it up. But I haven't thought about it beyond answering the first question.
Okay, so why do you think the podcast needs to be longer than 20, 30 minutes?
Because it's a conversation, not an interview.
Okay, great. Why do you think it's a conversation, not an interview?
Is it okay if I answer that as, why do you want it to be a conversation and not an interview?
Yeah, completely. That's
cool.
The point of the second question.
So the thing with an interview is that I think it assumes that I know what questions I want to ask ahead of time, and it creates the potential to sort of put blinders on the process where I'm funneled down a line of questioning due to time constraints, and I'm unable to sort of pick up, the surprises you expect to be there during a conversation, but you don't know are there, and follow them rather than go, I'd rather be able to follow those threads at least to some extent, rather than go, that's really interesting. Unfortunately, I've only got 15 minutes next and I need to get to this question.
Okay, so the difference between an interview and an interrogation is an interview in conventional senses. I'll use the term, never ask a question you don't already know the answer to. So in many instances, you might shape your question to either confirm or deny there's a reason you write questions out. You either, it's yes or no, it's binary in sense. An interrogation is designed to, like 5 whys, pull information from a topic, subject, person of interest, etc. So the difference between an interview, which is predefined in many instances, you can interview someone job interview, issue interview, etc., record a conversation, they're predetermined. You're looking to confirm or deny things in an interview basis. Whereas an interrogation or a question and answer session is almost free form. So you're locked in on the interview. I have 6 questions. I will talk until the questions finish. Thank you for your time, move on. Whereas an interrogation or a free-flowing discussion can go any thread. You know, as you well know, if you ask a question and you don't know where the answer goes, but you're still sort of looking for an outcome, you will explore a thread.
Yeah, and the idea of doing an interview in the context that you're describing is pretty much the opposite of what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in hearing someone's answer to a question. Like, you know, if I'm only asking questions that I know the answer to, the purpose of the interview is just to get the answers in their own words that I know already. And that's completely uninteresting to me. There's certainly, you know, topics of conversation and subjects that I'm interested in talking about. But once we get there, you know, I'm expecting that there's something interesting there that I don't know about. And that's kind of the point, to allow those opportunities to pop up and be followed if they're interesting.
Yeah, I completely agree. I find it you can get focus in an interview and you can get focus in an interrogation. An interrogation, for example, can be targeted on 1 or 2 key issues. Where were you at this time? What were you doing at that time? Where were you? All of those issues around circumstance. Whereas an interview can be quite short and deliberate, but focused on a particular topic. You could have a 20-minute interview using 5 whys, for example, but you would frame each component of the 5 whys with who, what, where, how as a story, still achieve the why, but you would get a narrative out of it. So you've got to understand that the 5 whys may well be couched in different terms. So don't lock your mental picture into 5 whys is I have to ask why each time. You may wish to build a narrative story.
So it's really about interrogatives, not that it has to be a why, just a, you know, a question, basically.
Yeah, in essence, but you are trying to build an overall picture of what's going on using a questioning technique that deepens as you go. And when you use the story method, who, what, when, where, how, why, where, which is every good paragraph in an essay should have it. Every good story has it, from intro, body, conclusion. Every narrative or question, if it doesn't include those facets, people get bored. If you use the 5 whys, who, what, when, where, how, why, when, where, you will build the chunks of the story until eventually they will tell you why I was there, why I was when there. Like each component of the story can be pulled out of that. But it's really a fucking art, mate. It's subtle. So an exceptional interviewer, and by proxy a police detective or an interrogator, is pulling a story out of you. They might be using the why as a decision-making algorithm to explore, but in essence, they're building a story. And we use the layer technique to go, who are you? Where are you? What are you? Like you're building a picture by asking those questions. There's no point going, why are you? Why are you? Like every why starts becoming confusing for people. But if you use the 5 whys as a layered approach, so picture combat, mission appreciation process, and SMEAC. Situation, mission, execution, administration, and communication. You can use 5 whys to elucidate all of that. Why are we here? Why are we talking to these people? Why are we doing it like this? Why are we waiting for this administration?
Yep.
Why are we talking on this communications? So you just need to frame your questions, not simply just on why, but why are certain things occurring? But if you're ruthless in your application of that as an interviewer and shape your questioning technique, you can be really focused really quick.
Okay.
And
So
that's how journalists work, mate. They're looking for the who, what, when, where, how, why. They want a story, they want it in 30 seconds, and they'll ask you the questions that pull that shit out of you.
Yeah. But I find I think there's a reason why long form podcasting has taken off. And I think it's that it creates the opportunity for a depth that's absent in most media interviews. Like a great, I'm trying to remember I think it was the Kathy Newman, Jordan Peterson interview where she was so focused on certain questions that it became like she was interviewing a caricature that she had in her mind rather than the person that she had in front of him, and it just derailed the whole process. And if you look at, the most well-known long-form podcast is probably going to be Joe Rogan's, and it has bad episodes and it has bad moments, but I think you get stuff out of that free form. You create opportunities in that longer free form process that just aren't available in a short form interview.
Well, don't get me wrong, I agree with both points of view. A longer term discussion can elucidate points of view you won't hear in a 5-minute podcast or a snapshot or a filter. By the same token, if I want my message to have punch through, I've got 30 seconds. I've got an ad.
Yeah, so basically, it's about developing that intuition about, developing that intuitive sense of when to move the conversation, where to move it to. I think that's fair enough. So it's not that it has to, it can be long, but it shouldn't be any longer than it needs to be.
There you go. You've nailed it. So let's talk about natural pauses. So we've discussed 2 particular topics right now. And what are we at? Let's look at your clock.
26 minutes.
Right. So in 26 minutes, we've talked about 5 whys, we've checked a couple of examples, and we've talked about interrogation versus information. So you can be focused. You can focus on a particular topic and work it through. It's not that I'm holding back. It's that if you look at how the conversation can flow, if you want to speed things up, you use leading questions. You will say, well, what do you think about that? What are your thoughts or opinions? And you shape them down the 5 why path or the story path. You get them to tell you the things that you are looking for, your markers. The examples that you used with a professional journalist with a biased opinion versus a psychiatrist with Jordan Peterson means that's combative. Whereas Joe Rogan goes in with basically an open mic with a segue and a conversation piece and see where it leads. Sometimes it's edited, sometimes it's shaped. But both instances are appropriate depending on the time frame of the listener.
Okay.
So what you need to balance is what message do you want people to hear and how do you get them there? A short form is very effective. TED Talks work, 21 minutes, bang, bucket. We're focused, this is what we're doing. Versus a discourse which might take 4 to 5 hours at a university level discussion on a complex topic.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just trying to keep track of where we are. So we're, I think, two questions into it at the moment. The first one's why it was long, and the second one is why is it a conversation, not an interview? So
correct.
Have we got a third one?
So I'll pass this to you. What should be the logical next step?
I'm just trying to gather back where I am.
That's okay.
So
doesn't necessarily need to be a why question.
Yeah.
The question is, what's the next layer beyond why is it this long? Is it a conversation? Is it an interrogation or a discussion?
Right, but I need to ask it as it can't be a conditional question, like in the sense that it's a true or false question.
No. So you need to be asking open-ended questions.
Yeah.
So you need to be framing the question in such a way that I want to give you information, not a binary question, yes, no, etc. So the next logical step is you'd be asking a question about, all right, let's talk about conversation, or let's talk about this topic, etc. Let's talk about how long is appropriate.
Okay, so it would be, how can you focus a conversation without sort of robbing it of opportunity?
This is completely self-referential. So we're talking about a conversation about a conversation.
Yeah, so, it's very meta.
Yeah. I'm sure your listeners are bored as fuck right now.
Yeah, I'm looking at the clock thinking.
Right. So let's crank this up. So how do you engage an audience in a longer form conversation? What do you want out of your A, listener? Remember, there's people who want to listen to this topic. And B, the person you're discussing, interviewing, engaging with. How do you trigger them to give you those takeaways in a hurry? How the fuck do you do that? Do you use research? Do you ask them to give it to you? Do you give them a lead? What are you looking for?
I normally think about it beforehand and think, what do I think? I essentially look at it from a selfish perspective because I'm not very good at putting myself in other people's shoes. So I look at it and go, what topics would be interesting to me in the context of having a conversation with whoever that person is, and then spend some time, thinking about stuff that would be genuinely interesting to me with the hope and assumption that, there's going to be at least one other person who might find that interesting as well.
Okay. So let's talk about the shit that's interesting to you then. So I know we've discussed a range of topics over the years. So, and I've got a lot of information that I can give. I've got fucking years worth of it, to be honest. But I'm happy to tell you about a topic, but what you've got to do is a bit of a two-way discussion. You've either got to pull it out of me or shut me up, or you've got to shape it to where you think the information needs to be. Because if you interview an expert, they'll go down a line that you think is enough. You've met the 5 whys or 3 whys or 2 whys, and you want to move it on. But an expert will want to expound on their theory. It's a balance between too much and enough, particularly on a time frame.
So you've got to be able to, especially in that context, it's sort of, you've got to be able to listen to it and go, yes, I understand what you're talking about. Here's the short summary that you're looking for that you're not giving me. Is that correct?
Correct. Yep. So
okay.
And the term is reflective questioning.
Okay.
So what you're telling me is this. So that is the exact example of Kathy Newman and Jordan Peterson. Revisit that interview and use the term reflective questioning, and you will hear Kathy Newman use those terms. So what you're telling me is, and you will see the response, Jordan Peterson going, no, that's not what I was telling you. So it's an interpretation of the interviewer.
Right. It's almost like comparing a steel man versus a straw man, where, one is reflective questioning in good faith and one is reflective questioning in bad faith.
Correct, with a bias.
Yes.
So what you're telling me is blah, 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 versus that, no, that's not what I said at all, particularly in an era when people can listen firsthand on what is being said versus the interpretation. And in an era of video and visual and voice, people will go, well, no, he didn't say that. So when the interviewer does a reflective approach, everyone else goes, well, that's not what he said, or that's not what I think he said. And then when the interviewee goes, you're right, that's not what I said, that's not what I meant. So you get this bias approach. What you've got to do is remain neutral through the questioning process, but still pull the information out.
Okay.
And that's hard. That's tricky.
So speaking about focusing the conversation, I think we've got one, maybe two whys left, but we're just over 30 minutes and there's other stuff I want to get to. So can we agree that the reason why the podcast is long, at least at the moment, is because I'm not good enough to do it quickly yet?
So I will support your assertion that the information you need is not focused. Okay, I know that sounds like I'm equivocating, but it's simply suggesting that with practice you will nail. Thanks, I appreciate your response. Let's move on.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
And that's what you need to do. You need to go, I understand what you're telling me. How about this? And lead them on a different path, or explore the next.
Okay. Now there's some training and curriculum stuff I want to talk about, but we did a lot of that in the last one, so I wanted to sort of diverge to something else, and hopefully if we've got enough time, we can come back to it. So you and I share a personality trait of being disagreeable, or in the technical sense, for the Big Five aspect scale, being low in agreeableness. Now, just to make it clear to people who are listening, I've put together a brief description of what it means to be low in trait agreeableness, if you'll bear with me. So, people low in agreeableness are not so nice: stubborn, dominant, harsh, skeptical, competitive, and in the extreme, even predatory. However, they tend to be straightforward, even blunt, so you know where they stand. Their extraordinarily high levels of skepticism play a protective role, although it often interferes with their ability to cooperate with or trust others whose intentions are genuinely good. They let you know exactly what they think, when they think it, whether you want to know it or not. In addition, because of their tendency to engage in conflict at a moment's notice, people exceptionally low in agreeableness do not sacrifice medium to long-term stability and functionality for the sake of short-term peace. The price paid for this: people close to those exceptionally low in agreeableness will frequently experience them as overbearing and uncaring. Now, I'm not suggesting that you're all of those things, but I am most of those things. And I think even though we share this trait to differing degrees, the point of difference is that I really struggled with it, but you seem to manage it far more productively than I do. So I'll get to the question. There's two of them. First, how do you manage this in the military, an organisation that genuinely prefers conformity and compliance, and how do you manage it among civilians?
What an outstanding question. That's actually an exceptional question. Okay, let's talk about disagreeableness and how I continue to apparently get employed, which is genuinely surprising to me. And not just employed, but apparently promoted, etc.
Yeah.
So the description of disagreeableness is apt for me, is appropriate. I've got no doubt it is for you too. I'm many of those things. I'm not by nature a hyper-friendly person. I don't have a large circle of close friends, etc., etc. I'm probably much like many of us in this boat. We are who we are. We do what we do. We just fucking get on with it. The thing that I've found over time is I'm not naturally averse to human contact and social interactions, etc. It's just that I don't demand it. I don't need it for me to function and do my job, role, work. So one of the things that I guess has mitigated that personality trait is Army taught me how to instruct and assess. So, as you know, you've got to be in front of people. You've got to talk to them. You've got to listen to what they say. You've got to make a judgment on performance and give them feedback that doesn't destroy their sad, tiny, pathetic lives, so to speak, if they don't meet the standard. Now, that sounds a bit harsh, but if you are disagreeable in your approach, you expect standards to be met all the time. And if they're not met, the question is, how do you get person A to standard B without destroying them? So that takes some level of, effort or control to understand what's driving them, why they're, just as we described around the 5 why and with exercise hierarchy, you can't achieve that, why not? Blah, 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 and off we go. In many instances, in fact, most instances, human performance and human behaviour is simply a facet that they don't know any different. Like, they don't know why they're doing things. Therefore, if you want them to change, you need to show them, explain, and do it. If you balance that against a disagreeable personality who simply expects that level of performance, if you hold on to the disagreeableness, what you will find is you will burn up. You will get to the point where you can't get your message across because you're too focused on their lack of performance rather than your lack of ability to change their performance. So by learning to engage through instructional and assessment skills, I get to mitigate their lack of performance, i.e. I get the shits when they're not performing at the required level, with I can fix that and hopefully they'll get to the point that I want them, expect them, etc., and I'll no longer be disagreeable to them in the most instance.
But so can you do that? Can you go through that process? How do you go through that process without them hating you all the while?
I'm not sure that hate is an accurate description for people who are disagreeable.
I mean for that. So if you're conducting the training as a disagreeable person, how can you approach that process so that the person you're training doesn't resent you at the end of it, despite getting them to a higher level of performance?
Okay, so you have to interpose on top of that many other facets of skill. Firstly, you need to control your behaviour. You can't yell inappropriately. You have to behave as a professional if you're interacting as a human in society. We don't yell at people you're trying to teach. You don't beat them. The days of, dare I say it, beatings will continue until morale improves. Thank you. That shit's gone, mate, as you well know. You can incentivise, you can cajole, you can guide, coach, mentor, influence. All of the techniques have to come to the fore. So for me, I use the technique that, in essence, the longer game is at play. For me not to be pissed off with performance, I need to put the effort in up front. They will perform. I will be happy. So I've had to learn to subdue my normally rapid or instant reaction towards poor performance, lack of behaviour, the things that annoy us as disagreeable personalities. And it is a thing. Don't get me wrong. I still get angry.
Yeah.
I still get frustrated, but I've learned to control it and understand that the long game at play is if I use all of the other skills that I have to get them to the point where I stop being disagreeable, they're performing at the required standard. Some of them are disagreeable, some of them are not. I don't really give a shit. But if they go through the process I think that works, they will stop pissing me off. Basically, that's how I view it. So, how can I explain this? Does that help?
Yeah. So I have, well, one aspect to my approach, and I'd be interested to hear what you think. So one of the things I mentioned in the description is that they tend to be straightforward, even blunt, so you know where they stand. And I think, at least from what I can tell, the strength that I wasn't aware of initially in being disagreeable is sincerity, because you tend to be honest with people most of the time, even if it's uncomfortable. When you tell them why you're doing it, why you want to help them, people tend to believe you. And they tend to appreciate that sincerity, even if it's uncomfortable.
I agree. So in my experience, and I can be, to be blunt, I can be a flaming chainsaw. I've ripped through shit like people wouldn't believe. Adults, humans, fucking you name it. I've learned to understand that, firstly, I'll take a step back so people understand where I'm coming from. I took a personal motto many, many years ago to be right. So if I do things, I want to be right. And it's not just like what I'm told, etc. I want to be accurate, factual, correct, professional. So what I do is the example. So over time, you develop those facets of behaviour where, me personally, I'm right. When people find me spelling wrong, saying things wrong, fucking things up, it's a point of pride to point it out to me, which is okay. But it means if I get pushed on a handful of points, it means everything else is right, correct. So if my behaviour is as best as I can make it the example, when I then go to impart my example, I'm as you would know, I'm the DS solution. And for those listening who are not familiar, I'm the directing staff. So I'm the benchmark upon which your performance is measured. So my actions, my behaviour, my language, my performance is, as best as I can make it, the exemplar. So if they see my performance and know that I'm not there to compromise or corrupt them, so if someone who presents, who knows what they're doing, who doesn't compromise their personal integrity and says, this is what I want you to do, this is why I want you to do it, I'm going to show you how to do it, and I'll step you through the process, they get on board really quick. So if you showed someone, firstly, if you picked up and I'll take a step back to some of your listeners' experience, a deadlift. If you picked up a 60-kilo deadlift perfectly for 10 reps, but at the same time you talked them through it, you could do it comfortably, you could breathe, you could show them correct posture and position and said, this is the example, this is what I want you to do. And they couldn't do it yet. But by the same token, you reserved your frustration. They couldn't. They had poor habits. They had poor behaviours, but you showed the best practice example. They trust you and they listen. So my first tick is done. They're listening. All right, great. So then I step them through the process. I show them, I demonstrate, I explain, I correct their behaviour or their performance until they achieve the required standard. And at some point, they themselves know that they've achieved the standard by someone, such as myself, who is the standard. So if they know that they're measuring themselves against the performance, the DS solution, so to speak, even if it's partially off, I don't need to be disagreeable.
So it sounds like integrity is a big part of not necessarily. I mean, you're not really removing the trait. All you're doing is saying, part of the trait is I like standards. They're there for a reason, but being fair in the application of it, that the standard applies to me just as much as it applies to you. So even though, someone may be subordinate over someone else, if the goal is to be right, then there's nothing wrong with a subordinate telling their superior, you've done this wrong. And I'm telling you because I know it's important to you to be right. So you have to be willing to take that criticism if you're that sort of person.
Yes, that's exactly, you are on the money. So when you rethink that description of disagreeableness, remember, disagreeable means that on a binary scale, there's agreeables.
Correct.
So if you're disagreeable, there's an agreeable. But in the middle, there's a standard. There's a center point. So if I become disagreeable, it's because your actions, behaviours, or whatever that I've observed or interacted with are not where I would want you to be. My preference is the centre, the standard. And it's, which is ironic, seeing as I'm a subversive motherfucker. But the point is, someone with disagreeable nature knows what to expect. They want a certain performance of behaviour, and if you deviate, they get the shits. So they want you to come back to the standard. So an agreeable nature might be the opposite. I don't know. I can't extrapolate fully the opposite because that's not me. I naturally push against questions, positions, oppositions constantly to get them to a point sometimes that I don't know. But I know that I don't like it and I would prefer it to be different. It's not, but the other side of this, by the way, is I don't do this to hurt. Like at no point is my disagreeableness designed to physically or mentally hurt people.
So how do you pick your battles in that sense, though? Because it's not. I mean, I lost a deployment just from being disagreeable, and it really came down to not being able to recognise that potentially counterproductive aspect of my personality was about to rear its head and rein it in before I opened my mouth and stepped on my dick effectively. Is it just you just got to eat it until you figure it out over time? You just got to learn through hard lessons.
To be honest, there's no right or wrong. For me, it was age and experience. And I've got to say, even now, I'm about to turn 49. I still get it wrong. Some days I fuck it up. Okay. Some days I overstep my boundaries. The difference is at my position, people don't necessarily lose their shit at me. They just look and ask, and I go, yeah, my bad. That was too far, so to speak. Being disagreeable as a personality trait is one thing, but at some point you realise you can't get through life like that. It doesn't work. You can be disagreeable all the fuck you like, but eventually everyone disagrees with you, which means if you want things or to do things or to buy things, it doesn't work. It's not effective. It's not efficient. So if you're a smart personality, when you ask the question about picking your battles, you go, all right, what am I going to die in a ditch over? What are the things that I won't compromise on? So for me, I have some certain, I guess, barriers or things that I will not compromise on. That's the shit that I'll die in a ditch over. That are the things that people are going to hear, so, shall I say, strident words.
Yeah.
Or written or verbal, I don't care. I will push back significantly on issues of my concern. But in many instances, learning to understand that in many times, shit, you won't win. People are people, they'll do their things. But if the disagreeableness for me has come into play or does come into play where it compromises your personal integrity and your personal values.
Got it.
So that I guess in summary, the shit that made sense to me is when people pushed against me personally, the shit that I was would define Dan Minton. That's when I push back. And then you have a schism or a break. You either accept that or just go, fuck it. Thanks, mate. I'm out. And move on.
Yeah. Now we've only got about 4 minutes left,
Okay.
and we didn't get to the curriculum stuff that I wanted to, but there is something to do with education that it's. I'm hoping we can wrap it up in time.
Okay.
So your time in the Army, your time in Civvy Street working for, what was it? Australian Industry Standards, and what you're doing now with Simbotix, it's all education is weaved through all of that. Now, I can understand, being in the Army, part of that is postings where education is a non-negotiable aspect of the job. But in Civvy Street and now in, I guess, in the private sector with Simbotix, you're still choosing to work. I assume you're choosing to work with education. What excites you about education?
Once again, what a great question. Noting our deliberate time limitation, I'll tell you what gets me focused. So the digital transformation of our economy provides far more opportunities than threats to jobs. So the ability to change and shape how you do work from now until forever is upon you. If you want to change, and we are demonstrating right now a different way of doing engagement and work, it is no less valid, it's no less appropriate to engage through a computer screen as it is face-to-face. So for me, the thing that is driving me, both in my Army role and in my Simbotix role, is the opportunity to change people's lives for the better. In essence, don't ignore the digital transformation of both the economy and society and your work. It's not all bad. It is not doom and gloom. You can have a life and you can have a worthwhile career. It's just different. That's it. And you will need to learn some new skills how to interact, and that's okay. You may not see people as much, once again, and that's okay. But if you can get your head around it, you can work anywhere on the planet. That's the point. Your future career is anywhere you want to be.
That's a great place to leave it, and we've done it with 40 seconds to go, so we've managed to do it within our time constraints, even with a drink break.
Well, once again, Sam, I'd like to reinforce the point to your listeners is get focused, understand your topic, ask smart questions, drill in if you have to, pull shit apart, that's okay. But in the end, you can achieve more in a short period of time than you think.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed it, consider subscribing so you don't miss out on future content. If you want to check out what Dan's doing, head over to simbotix.com.au, spelled Simbotix. If you've got any questions or comments for me, you can find me on Twitter at critical_coach, on Facebook at The Critical Coach, all one word, and on Instagram as the_critical_coach. Bye.